doesn't take long for many of us to figure out that life presents many challenges. Life can be tough for all of us at one time or another, if not over significant periods. In this week's gospel, Jesus presents himself as manna to the people. He talks about being something that had been a nourishing source for the Hebrew people in their history. But he points out something even more significant in that he himself desires to be with them on the journey, to be with them in a deeper and more powerful way, to be more than manna that appeared in the wilderness that supplied momentary food, just as the miracle that he had performed back in the feeding of the multitudes had provided something for their empty stomachs. But he wanted and knew that life would require of us more, because Jesus wants to be with us on this journey. He wants to provide for us along the way. He desires to be our joy, our comfort, our strength in the course of those challenges that we will inevitably face in life. Not in some kind of magical way or a cure-all, but in ways that will be supportive and that will bring support and strength during grief and during times when we need hope, comfort, and strengthening. Because Jesus knows better that the journey is tough. He knows that he himself will pay a significant price, and that those who will follow him will also be challenged to do the same. Many years ago, when Will Willimon was still Dean of Chapel at Duke University, he told a story at a conference that I attended about a phone call he received one night from an irate parent. It seems that this parent had a daughter who was in her second year of law school, doing very well in school, but she called to assail him because she believed her daughter had become involved in a cult through Duke University. He went on to sort of question her and ask about this cult that her daughter belonged to, and it turns out that the daughter was, like the family, Catholic. She did go to Mass with some regularity, more or less unusual for students at the university level, but nonetheless she was fairly faithful. And there was an attractive, bright, and engaging young priest who took care of and ministered to the Catholic students at Duke. It seems that this particular priest had invited the students to join him on a 3-week mission trip. And for whatever reason, this young woman decided to join that group. And she went on the trip, and the mission trip was to Haiti. The trip was not only engaging and powerful for her, it was transformative. She had been a regular participant in the chapel, but engaging in life as she experienced it in Haiti for the first time, and its brutal realities, painful, and absolutely dire poverty that she encountered, was unlike anything that she'd experienced any time before. The priest on the return continued to meet with a group of students that went, and as her own experience and processing of the experience moved forward, she found her life being called into more than just the standard kind of success that her parents could offer her, because they expected her to return from the graduate law school and work in their very successful law office in Boston. Well, as the story goes on, Will Willimon asked the mother, well, did you have your daughter baptized? I assume that you did, if you're active in the Catholic Church. And she said, well, of course we did. And you had her confirmed, yes, and you had her receiving communion with some regularity, yes. And he said, well, my dear, this was all your fault. You took your daughter, gave her over to God for his care, and by golly, she encountered him in a very powerful and real way on that trip to Haiti that changed her life, changed the direction of her life, gave her a new focus and purpose. So if you have any challenges, this doesn't sound like a cult to me. It just sounds like that your daughter is taking her faith rather seriously. It seems that when we want to follow in the footsteps of Jesus and to be more faithful in the way that we live our lives, and it can happen to any of us at various times, we will become more committed to a deeper and newer way of living and life. We will find ourselves embracing this new relationship, And that's what Jesus wants for us, is a deep and real and lasting relationship that begins right now, begins whenever that moment hits. It begins over all those years of preparation and what seem like rote actions of going to worship services, of receiving communion, of hearing the message, but then finally maybe getting it and having it transform our views. We discover a whole new way of living, one that's motivated by compassion and giving, mercy and caring, faith and hope and love. It's one that allows us to be more merciful with ourselves as well as with others. It allows us to find a new life worth living. As it turns out, this young woman went to Atlanta instead of back to Boston, got involved with social justice, law defense for those that were impoverished and could not otherwise provide legal services and counsel for themselves. She wouldn't make nearly the money, but she made for herself a very, very satisfying, rich, rewarding life. Let us all bring our hungers, the hungers that Jesus longs to fill with himself, not with just stuff that will pass for the moment. Let us bring our hungers and our thirst to the table of the Lord, where Jesus himself calls us, invites us, and promises through it to give us life.